When my own daughter accused me of having ruined my great-grandchildren's childhood, no one realized that her purple arm told a different story. The silence broke when I presented the photos she had hidden for years. It all began at a Sunday. Lunch. The kind of family gathering I looked forward to all week. At 68, these moments with my family were what kept me going after Harold, my husband, passed away 5 years ago. Our home had always been the meeting place, spacious, welcoming, with the aroma of my Sunday roast permeating every room. Vanessa, my 45-year-old daughter, arrived late that day, as usual. She walked in with her teenage children and her husband, Robert. There was something about the way she moved, careful, restrained. I knew her too well not to notice. 25 years of marriage to Robert had changed my daughter in so many ways that sometimes I wondered if she was still the girl. I raised. "Mom, you didn't need to do all this," she said, looking at the table I had prepared. Always minimizing my efforts, always seeming uncomfortable with anything I did. "It's nothing," I replied, hugging my great-grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, who barely returned the gesture. In recent months, they had grown increasingly distant, more withdrawn. Emma, who used to be so talkative, now barely raised her eyes from the floor. Robert entered last, filling the room with his presence, tall, imposing, with that smile that never reached his eyes. "Margaret," he said, greeting me with a nod. Never Mom, always Margaret. A constant reminder that I was an outsider in his vision of the family. The lunch proceeded as usual. Superficial conversations, tense smiles, and that feeling that everyone was playing roles in a poorly rehearsed play. It was when I served dessert that everything changed. "Emma, dear, you've barely touched your food," I commented quietly, serving a piece of pie to my great-granddaughter. "Is everything all right?" Before Emma could answer, Robert intervened. "She's fine. She's just not a fan of your cooking." The comment hung in the air like a heavy cloud. I saw Vanessa stiffen, her hand instinctively pulling down the sleeve of her sweater. "I was just asking," I said, trying to stay calm. "You're always just asking, aren't you, Margaret?" Robert said, placing his fork on the table with more force than necessary. "Always meddling, always thinking you know more about our children than we do." "Robert, please," Vanessa murmured, her gaze fixed on her plate. It was Emma who spoke next, her voice almost a whisper. "Grandma gave me a book about families and how they should be." I felt my heart race. 2 weeks earlier, I had given Emma a book about healthy family relationships. It wasn't much, at least it shouldn't have been. But from the look Robert gave my granddaughter, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. "So that's it," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "You're trying to put ideas in her head, trying to tell her there's something wrong with our family." "That's not what," I began, but he interrupted me. "You always do this, always trying to belittle us, always suggesting we're not good enough." He turned to the children. "Go to the car, now." The children stood up without questioning, their movements robotic, trained. Tyler didn't even look at me, but Emma hesitated for a second, her eyes meeting mine in a silent plea I couldn't decipher. When they left, Robert stood up too. "Come on, Vanessa." That's when I saw it. As Vanessa stood up, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a purple and yellowish bruise that extended along her forearm. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw in them a mixture of shame and plea. "Vanessa," I called, my voice trembling. "What happened to your arm?" She quickly pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. "It's nothing. I hit it on the cabinet door." Robert gave a short laugh. Always clumsy, my Vanessa. Something inside me broke at that moment. All the small observations, all the signs I had ignored or rationalized over the years suddenly aligned like pieces of a macabre puzzle. "That doesn't look like an accident," I insisted, taking a step toward my daughter. That's when Vanessa exploded. her words coming out like weapons aimed directly at me. "Stop it, Mom. Stop interfering in my life. You're ruining my children's childhood with your insinuations. Why can't you just leave us alone?" I was paralyzed, her words hitting me like physical blows. But it wasn't just what she said. It was the terror in her eyes as she said it, the way her gaze flew to Robert with each word, as if seeking approval. Robert smiled, that cold smile that never reached his eyes. "See? Not even your own daughter wants you around. Maybe it's time to accept that you're no longer needed in this family." They left, leaving me alone in my dining room, with the plates still half full and the deafening silence. Something had changed inside me. The fear I had felt for years, fear of losing contact, fear of offending, fear of seeing my great-grandchildren less, was replaced by a new kind of fear, much more urgent. I went upstairs to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept family albums. There was something there, hidden at the bottom, that I had noticed weeks ago but hadn't had the courage to examine. A simple manila folder that Vanessa had left when she came to help me organize some old things. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Photos that Vanessa had taken of herself over the years, documenting bruises, cuts, even a cast on her arm. Each image carefully dated, like evidence, like a silent cry for help that she never had the courage to voice. I sat down, on the edge of the bed, my world crumbling around me. How long had this been going on? How long had I turned a blind eye, accepted excuses, ignored signs? My phone vibrated with a message. It was Emma, my great-granddaughter. "Grandma, please help. Me. It's not just Mom." The horror of that realization hit me like a high-speed train. It wasn't just Vanessa. The children, too. As tears streamed down my face, I made a decision. The silence was over. No matter what it cost, no matter who I had to face, I would no longer stay quiet. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to look the other way, even when it means confronting truths that shatter your heart. I barely slept that night. Emma's message burned in my mind as I stared at the ceiling, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The photos from Vanessa's hidden folder were spread across my bed, physical evidence of years of suffering I had somehow missed. When the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, I made a cup of coffee and tried to organize my thoughts. I needed to be methodical, careful. One wrong move could push Vanessa and the children further away, or worse, put them in greater danger. Looking back, the signs had always been there. Vanessa canceling family visits at the last minute, the children becoming increasingly withdrawn. The way Robert always spoke for his family, as if they were extensions of himself rather than individuals. I picked up a photo from 2012. Vanessa with a black eye, poorly concealed with makeup. The date coincided with when they had canceled their Christmas visit, claiming Vanessa had the flu. I remembered calling how Robert had answered, saying she was sleeping. His voice controlling, brooking no argument. My phone rang, startling me. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. "Mom?" Her voice was strained, artificially bright. "About yesterday. I'm sorry we left so abruptly." "Vanessa," I said carefully, "we need to talk about what I saw." A pause. Too long. "I told you, I bumped into a cabinet. And the photos I found in your folder? The ones you've been taking for years?" Her sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several seconds. "You went through my things?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You left them here, sweetheart, I think. I think part of you wanted me to find them." "You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "You need to forget what you saw, please." "Emma texted me, Vanessa. She's asking for help." Another silence, this one heavy with fear. "Robert checks her phone," she finally said, her voice trembling. "If he saw that, then let me help you. All of you. You can't." The defeat in her voice broke my heart. No one can. The line went dead. I sat motionless, the phone still pressed to my ear. Then, with determined hands, I reached for my address book. Linda Harrison had been my friend for 40 years and had worked in social services before retiring. If anyone would know what to do, it would be her. 2 hours later, Linda sat across from me at my kitchen table, her face grave as she examined the photos. "This is serious, Margaret. Years of documented abuse. But you need more than these if you want to help them." "More? What more do I need than proof that my daughter and grandchildren are being harmed?" Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The system is complicated. If Vanessa denies the abuse, and she likely will out of fear, these photos alone won't be enough. So what do I do? Just wait until something worse happens?" "No." Linda's voice was firm. "You document everything. Every interaction, every canceled visit, every strange behavior from the children. And you build a relationship of trust with Emma. She reached out to you. That's a crack in the wall of silence Robert has built." For the next week, I did exactly that. I wrote down everything I could remember from the past years, patterns I had dismissed, incidents I had rationalized. The picture that emerged was devastating. Robert had systematically isolated Vanessa from her friends and family, controlled their finances, and established a reign of terror in their home. I tried calling Vanessa daily, but she either didn't answer or spoke briefly, her words measured, as if Robert was standing right beside her, which, I suspected, he often was. Then, on Thursday evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there stood Emma, her backpack clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I stay here tonight?" I ushered her in quickly, my heart pounding. "Of course, sweetheart. Does your father know you're here?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I was supposed to be at a study group, but I couldn't. I couldn't go back home tonight." "What happened?" I asked, guiding her to the couch. With shaking hands, she unzipped her backpack and pulled out her phone. On it was a video. She pressed play, and I watched in horror as Robert screamed at Vanessa, his face distorted with rage, while Tyler cowered in the corner of the room. "He found out Mom was talking to you," Emma whispered. "He took her phone and smashed it. He said no one was going to break up his family." As I held my trembling granddaughter, I knew the time for caution was over. The wall of silence had protected Robert for too long. It was time to break it, completely and irrevocably. "He's going to come looking for me," Emma whispered, glancing nervously at the windows. "When he realizes I'm not at Kaylee's house." I pulled the living room curtains closed and sat beside her on the couch. "You're safe here, Emma." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Robert wouldn't simply let his control slip away. Men like him never did. "We need to call the police," I said gently, trying not to frighten her further. Emma's eyes widened with panic. "No, he said if we ever called the police, he'd—" She stopped, unable to finish. "What about your mom and Tyler?" I asked. "Mom sent me here," Emma confessed, her voice breaking. "After Dad smashed her phone, when he went to the garage to get a drink, she told me to run, to come to you with this." She held up her phone with the damning video. "She said you'd know what to do." My heart swelled with pride and broke simultaneously. Even trapped in that nightmare, Vanessa had found the courage to protect her daughter, to create an escape route. "Your mother was right to send you here," I said, squeezing Emma's hand. "But now we need to help her and Tyler, too." I called Linda. Again, my voice urgent as I explained the situation. She arrived 20 minutes later with a woman she introduced as Sarah, a social worker specializing in domestic violence cases. Sarah spoke gently to Emma while I made hot chocolate in the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see my great-granddaughter's shoulders gradually relaxing as she talked, Sarah's manner both professional and kind. "The video is compelling evidence," Linda told me quietly as I stirred the milk. "But Emma's testimony is even more important, and we need to get Vanessa and Tyler out of that house." "Robert will never let them go willingly," I said. "No, he won't," Linda agreed. "That's why we need to be strategic." Sarah joined us in the kitchen while Emma used the bathroom. "We're going to file an emergency protective order tonight," she explained. "The video, combined with Emma's statement and the historical photos you found, should be enough to get it granted immediately." "What about Vanessa and Tyler?" I asked. "Once we have the order, police officers will accompany us to the house to ensure their safe removal," Sarah explained. "But we need to move quickly." As if on cue, my phone rang. An unknown number. "Mom?" Vanessa's voice was barely audible. "I'm using the neighbor's phone. Is Emma with you?" "Yes, she's safe," I assured her. "Vanessa, listen to me. We're getting help. Right now." "He knows," she whispered. "He's been drinking. He's looking for the keys to the car." My blood ran cold. "Is Tyler with you?" "Yes. We're locked in the bathroom." Her voice broke. "Mom, I'm so scared." "Give me the address," Sarah said, already reaching for her phone. "We'll call for immediate police intervention." The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls, official statements, and crushing anxiety. Emma remained silent, curled up on my couch, her eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Finally, Sarah's phone rang. She stepped aside to answer it, her expression serious. When she returned, her relief was palpable. "The police have Robert in custody," she announced. "Vanessa and Tyler are safe. They're being brought here now." Emma broke down in tears, the strain of months, perhaps years of fear finally finding release. I held her, my own tears flowing freely. When the doorbell rang 30 minutes later, I opened it to find Vanessa standing there, Tyler clinging to her side. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but there was something else there too, a fragile spark of hope. "Mom?" she whispered, falling into my arms. We gathered in my living room, the children huddled together on the couch, Vanessa sitting beside them, her hands still trembling. Sarah explained what would happen next, the protective order, the upcoming legal proceedings, the support services available to them. "You can all stay here," I said firmly, "for as long as you need." Vanessa looked up at me, years of shame and secrecy reflected in her eyes. "I should have told you sooner, I was so afraid." "I should have seen it sooner," I countered, taking her hand. "The signs were there. I just didn't want to believe them." Later that night, after the children had finally fallen asleep in my spare bedroom, Vanessa and I sat at the kitchen table, cups of tea growing cold between us. "When did it start?" I asked softly. "Little things at first," she said, staring into her cup. "Controlling comments, criticism, then he pushed me during an argument. He was so sorry afterward." She gave a bitter laugh. "They're always sorry, aren't they? Until the next time. Why didn't you leave?" "He threatened to take the kids if I ever tried. Said no judge would give custody to an unfit mother, and he'd make sure I looked unfit." She looked up at me, her eyes haunted. And part of me believed I deserved it. I reached across the table and took her hand. "No one deserves that. No one." "I know that now," she whispered, but it took Emma's courage to make me see it. She refused to become what he wanted her to be. Outside, the first hints of dawn were breaking across the horizon. A new day, a new beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and healing wounds both visible and invisible. But as I looked at my daughter, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: determination. The silence had finally been broken. And in that breaking, a family had found its way back to each other. The weeks that followed brought changes I never could have anticipated. My quiet house transformed overnight into a sanctuary for 3 wounded souls. Vanessa and the children moved into my spare rooms, filling the empty spaces with their presence. But the shadow of Robert's influence lingered, even in his absence. The emergency protective order was extended into a temporary restraining order, keeping Robert legally at bay while the courts processed the evidence. But legal protection couldn't shield us from everything. The first blow came from Janet, my younger daughter. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice sharp with accusation. "What have you done, Mom?" she demanded without preamble. "Robert called David last night, absolutely devastated." David was Janet's husband, who had always gotten along well with Robert. Golf games and business connections creating a bond I now questioned. "I've done what needed to be done," I replied, keeping my voice level. "There are things about Robert you don't know." "He told us everything," Janet countered. "How you've been trying to drive a wedge between him and Vanessa for years. How you manipulated Emma into making false accusations." My hand tightened around the phone. "That's not what happened." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you couldn't bear not being the center of attention, so you destroyed a family." The unfairness of her words stung like a physical slap. "Janet, Robert has been abusing Vanessa and the children for years. We have evidence. Evidence you probably coerced." "God, Mom, I knew you were lonely after Dad died. But this is beyond—" I cut her off, my patience fraying. "Come see for yourself. Talk to Vanessa. Look at the photographs, the video." "I don't need to. Robert's been part of this family for 25 years. We know him." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "I'm not getting involved in your crusade," Janet said coldly. "But don't expect us at Thanksgiving if you're going to continue with these ridiculous allegations." The line went dead, leaving me stunned. I hadn't expected Janet to take Robert's side so readily, to dismiss her sister's suffering without even investigating. When I told Vanessa about the call, she just nodded, unsurprised. "Robert's always been good at managing his image," she explained. "Charming when he needs to be. He's probably been laying groundwork with Janet and David for years just in case." "In case of what? In case I ever tried to leave?" Her voice was matter of fact, but I saw the pain behind her eyes. "Isolation is part of the pattern, Mom. First he separated me from my friends, then from you, and now he's trying to cut off Janet too." The isolation grew more pronounced as days passed. Friends who had known us for years began to avoid me at the grocery store. Neighbors who usually stopped to chat now hurried past with barely a nod. Someone even left an anonymous note in my mailbox. "False accusations destroy lives. Shame on you." "He's good at playing the victim," Vanessa explained. When I showed her the note, her voice tinged with bitter knowledge. "He's probably telling everyone how his vindictive mother-in-law turned his family against him. Even my church, where I'd been a member for over 30 years, became a battleground." Robert had rarely attended, but suddenly he was there every Sunday. Sitting in the front row, the picture of a heartbroken father kept from his children. He spoke tearfully to anyone who would listen about his false accusation and his overwhelming desire to reunite his family. It worked. People I'd known for decades began to look at me with suspicion, whisper behind my back. Some even approached me directly, urging me to help heal this rift and stop the madness before it's too late. "You don't understand what you're doing," Helen Porter, my supposed friend of 20 years, told me after service one Sunday. "Breaking up a family based on what could just be a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding," I insisted, my patience wearing thin after weeks of such comments. "Well, Robert seems genuinely devastated," she countered. "And frankly, Margaret, you've been different since Harold died. More interfering." She placed a hand on my arm, her expression dripping with false concern. "Is it possible you're seeing problems that aren't there because you're lonely?" I pulled away from her touch. Is it possible you're ignoring evidence of abuse because it makes you uncomfortable? She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. I'm trying to help. No, I said quietly. You're trying to make this go away so you don't have to face the ugly truth that someone you know is capable of monstrous behavior. After that, the church I'd called home for 3 decades no longer felt welcoming. We stopped attending, adding another layer to our isolation. The children felt it too. When school started in September, Emma and Tyler returned to find that rumors had preceded them. Former friends avoided them. Teachers watched them with wary eyes. Tyler, already quiet, retreated further into himself. Emma faced more direct confrontation. Jessica asked me why I was lying about my dad, she told me one afternoon, her eyes brimming with tears. She said her mom told her I was making it all up for attention. Vanessa tried to enroll them in a different school, but Robert fought it legally. And in the small town where residency dictated school attendance, our options were limited. Even my brother Edward, whom I'd always been close to, called to suggest I was taking things too far. You've always been overprotective of Vanessa, he said. Maybe you're not seeing this clearly. I have photos, Ed, I said, frustration mounting. A video. Emma's testimony. Vanessa's statement. All I'm saying is that domestic situations can be complicated. There are 2 sides to every story. Not to abuse, I replied firmly. There's never justification for that. He sighed. Just be careful you're not burning bridges the whole family will need to cross someday. By October, our world had shrunk dramatically. The 5 of us, myself, Vanessa, Emma, Tyler, and Linda, who remained steadfastly supportive, formed a small island surrounded by increasingly hostile waters. But something unexpected was happening within our isolated sanctuary. Without Robert's oppressive presence, the children were slowly emerging from their shells. Tyler began to speak more at dinner. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. And Vanessa, my beautiful, strong Vanessa, stood a little straighter each day. One evening, as we washed dishes together, Vanessa looked at me with clear eyes. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, she admitted quietly. All this judgment, the isolation. I paused, soapy plate in hand. Is it? She considered for a moment, then nodded. For the first time in decades, I'm not afraid in my own home. She looked toward the living room, where Emma and Tyler were playing a board game, their laughter floating back to us. And I get to hear that sound again. I'd forgotten what it was like. The isolation was real, and it cut deep. But in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that we had made the right choice. Because sometimes, being alone with the truth is better than being surrounded by comfortable lies. The court date for the permanent restraining order arrived on a cold November morning. We pulled up to the courthouse, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach as I spotted Robert's sleek black car already in the parking lot. It's going to be okay, I reassured Vanessa, whose knuckles had turned white around her purse strap. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the instinctive terror that had been conditioned into her over decades. Emma and Tyler sat silently in the back seat, both dressed in their best clothes, both looking far older than their years. Sarah, our social worker, met us at the entrance. Remember, she said quietly, stick to the facts. Don't let him provoke you. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate, which somehow made it more intimidating. Robert sat at one table with his attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit. He didn't turn when we entered, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. We took our seats at the opposite table where our attorney, Ms. Rivera, waited with a reassuring smile. I'd used a significant portion of my savings to hire her, unwilling to leave Vanessa's future to chance or overworked public. Defenders. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, entered and proceedings began. Robert's attorney went first, painting a picture of a loving father and husband, blindsided by false accusations from a meddling mother-in-law who had always disapproved of him. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "Mr. Caldwell has been a pillar of the community for decades. These allegations have already cost him tremendously: his reputation, his home life, his relationship with his children. We ask the court to see this for what it is, a family dispute that has spiraled out of control." I watched Robert as his lawyer spoke. He sat with his head slightly bowed, the picture of dignified suffering. I wondered how many people in this very room were fooled by his performance. When it was our turn, Ms. Rivera stood. "Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is a clear case of domestic abuse spanning more than 2 decades. She methodically presented our evidence: Vanessa's dated photographs of injuries, medical records with suspicious gaps, Emma's testimony about growing up in fear, and the video that had finally broken the silence." The courtroom was silent as the video played. On the large screen, Robert's face contorted with rage as he screamed at Vanessa, his fist punching the wall inches from her head while Tyler cowered in the corner. I glanced at the judge, whose expression had hardened as she watched. But more surprisingly, I noticed movement in the gallery behind us. Turning slightly, I saw Janet, my younger daughter who had refused to believe us, sitting there, her face pale with shock. When the video ended, Robert's attorney attempted damage control. Context is important, Your Honor. This was clearly a heated moment, not representative of— "Let me stop you there," the judge interrupted. "There is no context that makes this behavior acceptable." Vanessa testified next, her voice growing stronger as she detailed the years of abuse, control, and fear. I had never been prouder of her courage. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he maintained his composure, expressing regret for losing his temper in the video, but insisting it was an isolated incident brought on by stress. "My mother-in-law has turned my family against me," he said, his voice catching with calculated emotion. "I just want my wife and children home where they belong." The judge's gaze was penetrating. "Mr. Caldwell, do you deny the injuries documented in these photographs?" For the first time, Robert faltered. "Vanessa has always been clumsy. She falls. She walks into things. For 20 years? The judge's tone was skeptical. "Your Honor," Robert's attorney interjected, "many of these photos lack context or verification." "That's not true." A voice spoke from the gallery. All heads turned. Janet stood, her hands trembling. "Your Honor, I have something to add." The judge considered her for a moment, then nodded. "Approach." Janet walked forward, casting a brief, apologetic glance at me before addressing the court. "My name is Janet Mitchell. I'm Vanessa's sister." She took a deep breath. "Last Christmas, I walked in on Robert grabbing Vanessa's arm so hard it left marks. When I confronted him later, he threatened that if I ever mentioned it, he would make sure I never saw my niece and nephew again." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I took a photo of her arm that day. I was too afraid to say anything then, but I can't stay silent anymore." Robert's facade finally cracked. "You're lying!" he shouted, half rising from his seat. "This is a conspiracy!" "Mr. Caldwell, control yourself," the judge warned sharply. But Robert was beyond control, now his mask slipping completely. 25 years I've put up with this family. 25 years of ingratitude, of judgment." He pointed at Vanessa, his face contorted with the same rage we'd seen in the video. "You think you can leave? You're nothing without me. Nothing." Courthouse. Security moved quickly to restrain him as he continued to shout threats. The judge ordered him removed from the courtroom, then looked at the rest of us, her decision evident in her expression. An hour later, we stood on the courthouse steps, permanent restraining order granted, the weight of decades lifting from Vanessa's shoulders. Janet approached cautiously. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "I should have believed you from the start." Vanessa hesitated, then opened her arms. As the sisters embraced, I felt something shift, a family fracture beginning to heal. The wall of silence had finally, irrevocably shattered, and in its breaking, truth had emerged, painful but cleansing, like the first light of dawn after the darkest night. Spring came to our little town, bringing with it the scent of renewal. 6 months had passed since that day in the courtroom, 6 months of gradual healing and cautious rebuilding. Vanessa stood in my garden, kneeling beside the flower bed we had dug together, her hands deep in the soft earth. The sun caught in her hair, highlighting strands of silver I hadn't noticed before. She looked up at me and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, something that had once been so rare it startled me whenever I saw it. "These tulips are going to be beautiful," she said, patting the soil around a bulb. "Just like their gardener," I replied, joining her in the dirt. She laughed softly, the sound still new enough to make my heart swell. Flatterer. So much had changed since that cold November day, when Robert's mask had finally slipped completely. The restraining order remained in place, renewed after Robert violated it twice, once by sending threatening messages, and once by attempting to approach Emma outside her school. Each violation strengthened our case and extended the legal protections. The divorce proceedings were ongoing. But Vanessa had excellent representation, and Robert's courtroom outburst had done him no favors with the family court judge. The house they had shared had been sold, with Vanessa's portion placed in a trust for the children's education. Healing came in small steps, some forward, some back. There were still nights when I would wake to the sound of Vanessa crying out in her sleep, trapped in nightmares where she couldn't escape. There were days when Tyler wouldn't speak at all, withdrawing into himself like a turtle into its shell. And Emma still flinched at sudden movements, a reflexive response to years of living on edge. But there were also moments of extraordinary progress. Tyler had joined a science club at his new school and was thriving under the mentorship of a kind patient teacher. Emma had started therapy and was slowly learning to trust again, even making a few close friends who knew her story and still accepted her. And Vanessa, my brave, resilient daughter, had enrolled in community college classes, pursuing the degree that Robert had convinced her to abandon when they married. She had also started a support group for other women in our community, breaking the silence that trapped so many in cycles of abuse. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Janet stood on the porch, a casserole dish in her hands and uncertainty in her eyes. "I brought dinner," she said. "Lasagna, the good kind with extra cheese like Mom used to make." Our relationship with Janet was still healing, still tentative. Her testimony had helped secure the restraining order, but years of believing Robert's lies had created a rift that couldn't be mended overnight. Still, she was trying, showing up consistently, proving her regret through actions rather than just words. "Perfect timing," I said, ushering her in. "We've worked up an appetite in the garden." Inside, Emma was helping Tyler with his science project at the dining table. They looked up when Janet entered, their expressions guarded but not hostile. "Aunt Janet brought lasagna," I announced. "With extra cheese?" Tyler asked, a spark of interest in his eyes. Janet nodded. "And garlic bread. I remembered it's your favorite." A small smile flickered across Tyler's face, a tiny victory that made Janet's eyes shine with unshed tears. Dinner that night wasn't perfect. Conversation still occasionally stalled, and certain topics remained carefully avoided. But as I looked around the table at my family, damaged but healing, fractured but mending, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had survived. More than that, we were rebuilding something stronger than what had been broken. After dinner, as Janet helped me with the dishes, she paused, her hands submerged in soapy water. "I should have seen it," she said quietly. "All those years, I should have noticed something was wrong." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "We all missed the signs, Janet. Robert was very good at hiding who he really was. but you figured it out. You saw through him when no one else did. I thought about that day when I'd first seen the bruise on Vanessa's arm, the moment when years of small observations had suddenly aligned into a terrible picture. I wish I'd seen it sooner, I admitted. But what matters is that we did see it, eventually. We broke the silence before it was too late. Later that evening, after Janet had gone and the children were in bed, Vanessa and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I've been offered a job," she said suddenly. "At the community center, part-time, working with their outreach program for domestic violence survivors." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's wonderful." She nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "I used to think my life was over, that I'd never be more than Robert's victim, that the best I could hope for was to survive each day." She turned to me, her gaze clear and determined. I was wrong. "Yes," I agreed, taking her hand. "You were. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. Couldn't have pictured my daughter free, my grandchildren healing, our family slowly knitting itself back together. The road had been harder than I ever expected, marked with isolation, judgment, and painful truths. But sitting there in the gentle spring evening, watching Vanessa's face in profile, stronger now, more herself than she had been in decades, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it, because sometimes breaking the silence is the only way to find your voice again.